Bloodshed at the standoff in Oregon. It's SkyWatch TV for Thursday, January 28th, 2016. I'm Derek Gilbert. Ammon Bundy, leader of the armed militia occupying the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Burns, Oregon, was arrested Tuesday afternoon with 7 others after a traffic stop turned violent. 2 cars with members of the militia occupying the refuge were stopped by police on their way to a community meeting at a nearby town. An exchange of gunfire led to the death of 55-year-old Lavoy Finicum, one of the spokesmen for the group. Details of the confrontation are unclear at this time. Those arrested face felony charges. The militia members remaining at the wildlife refuge say they intend to stay there until their demands are met. A new phase may be opening in the struggle against the Islamic State. Just before Winter Storm Jonas slammed the East Coast, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell used a procedural move on a proposed authorization for the use of military force, invoking a rule that could allow the bill to bypass the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and go straight to the Senate floor for a vote. Now, this surprised Democrats and Republicans, especially because the bill appears to give President Obama more than he asked for when he originally approached Congress for an authorization a year ago. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, said this proposal, written by Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, is a total rewrite of the War Powers Clause in the Constitution, essentially a declaration of global martial law, giving the president the power to send American troops almost anywhere in the world for almost any reason, with no limit on the amount of time they can be deployed. Now, there are some new developments that we've been watching around the world. Report that U.S. troops have taken over an airfield, a new air base in northeastern Syria near the borders of Iraq and Turkey, and reports that U.S. troops are part of a coalition that have landed at 2 locations in Libya, apparently to head off the ISIS takeover of Libya's oil field and oil terminals on the Mediterranean coast. For expert analysis, we turn to Pentagon consultant and author of Never Submit: Will the Extermination of Christians Get Worse Before It Gets Better?, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis.
Colonel McGinnis, if the reports that we hear are accurate, that U.S. soldiers are outfitting an air base in northeast Syria to perhaps launch attacks against the Islamic State, how does this change things in terms of our approach to dealing with the Islamic State? And I guess the bigger question from a Christian perspective, will this make any difference to the Christians still on the ground in Syria and Iraq?
There are very few Christians left in that region. They're scattered, a few in refugee camps, but for the most part, they're hiding out. Many were killed. I think it's really much too late, a year and a half after they took Mosul. They've destroyed most of the churches, certainly the monasteries, the Christian homes. They've just devastated Christendom in that part of the world. So if, in fact, the United States is working with indigenous forces and establishing some sort of air base, it's going to be of little consequence, certainly for the Christian population. Now, longer term, if, in fact, that's taking place, and I can't confirm or, I just don't know, then it's probably in preparation for trying to take Raqqa, trying to retake Mosul, and, of course, with the success of Ramadi, which is kind of a marginal success because they continue to have problems there, as well as Fallujah and north of Baghdad. But, it is a step. It is a step in the right direction.
Now, there have been accusations leveled at one of our allies in particular, that being Turkey, a NATO member, that certainly Russia has pointed a finger at President Erdogan. And there seems to be some evidence suggesting that the Turks have at least turned a blind eye toward black market oil flowing across their borders, and perhaps they've even been more cooperative than that in helping the Islamic State. The peace talks that were supposed to begin in Geneva Monday have been pushed off to the end of the week at the earliest. It appears that there are different players with a stake in what happens in Syria that can't even agree on who should have a seat at the negotiating table. How optimistic are you that some sort of an arrangement can be reached?
Well, I'm not very optimistic at this point. You're right about the Turks. Of course, their objection is that the Russians, especially Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, has insisted that the Kurdish Democratic Union Party, the PYD, participate in the talks because they've done a lot of the fighting. Unfortunately, the Turks object. They consider the PYD an enemy. And so they don't want them involved in these talks. So that really throws a monkey wrench into the whole prospect that we're going to have a meaningful outcome. Now, we don't know who from the regime of Bashar Assad is participating or has been invited. We do know that the Saudis are trying to run the show, but in reality, it appears the Turks have objected, the Russians have intervened. We're probably to a certain degree on the sidelines because there's so many other Islamist groups and the like. So this is going to be a complex set of negotiations if it does take place beginning Friday. I suspect, though, it will ultimately be the can will be kicked. It could take place a couple of days, and then they're going to have to reconvene in weeks or months ahead. It's just not an easy solution.
Changing gears a bit, one of the aspects of your book that I found really interesting, and it confirms things that I've been reading from some other experts, scholars who've studied Islamic history, for example, relating to the mindset of Islam, the worldview. We've seen a number of stories coming out of Germany and other European countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, about the behavior of refugees and asylum seekers, especially the incidents in Cologne on New Year's Eve, where dozens of women reported being sexually assaulted by women or by men of Arabic or North African origin. What in your research for the book, Never Submit, did you find about the Islamic worldview most disturbing, and how optimistic are you that those communities of refugees can be integrated into Western society?
Well, let me begin by just certainly in Never Submit, I talk about immigrant criminal behavior in Western Europe. And I noted that there was a Danish psychologist that interviewed a lot of North African and Middle Eastern Muslims that were involved in crime. And in fact, 70% in recent years of all the crime in Denmark is attributed to this very small population of males that come from that part of the world. And it's also of note that in Western Europe, as well as in the United States, when you poll Muslim populations, you find an incredibly high percentage of those populations justify violence if their faith is offended. They justify suicide bombings. I mean, it surprises people, even those that may be second or third generation out of the Middle East or North Africa. So there's something about their faith that contributes to what we're seeing in their failure to assimilate, to embrace Western values. Now, what we do know is that Islam is basically perfect for the fragile personality that has the need to hate. And that is exactly what we find in Western Europe. There's a hatred, and not only of the general culture, but also disrespect of how Western women behave. They don't like how they dress. They think that they are to be taken for their sexual pleasures. Terrible things go on. The Muslims expect to be aggressive, to handle conflicts. They are not raised like we raise our young, especially boys in the United States, where we give them a lot of structure. We punish them when they do things wrong. In a Muslim family, and we see this also in the West in certain Muslim families, that they're given free rein as a child, no discipline. And so when they get up older, it's interesting that the local imam and the mosque and their parents start to give them far more structure. They even tell them who they're going to marry and so forth. So what you have is young people, young males especially, those that are invading Western Europe, that have little self-responsibility, little self-discipline. They blame others. They need and they have a very directive religion, but if you don't have those religious figures around to guard them all the time and to give them direction, then they have serious problems. So these are aspects of what comes out of Islam that influences the culture, that causes them not to assimilate well in a Western culture, which is radically different.
Sounds like there are only a couple of paths ahead for Western Europe and the United States if we follow the lead of the Western Europeans in bringing large numbers of these young men into the country. And that's either submit to them, civil war as they are forced to submit, or mass deportation. And I don't see any one of those three options being particularly pleasant.
Well, there's an alternative to that as well, and that would be that you have to have an iron fist that brings these young Muslim men under control. Mm-hmm. No wonder that in countries like Iraq, you had dictators. In countries like Syria, you had dictators. In countries like Egypt, you had dictators. Libya, you name the Muslim country where you don't have iron-fisted leaders, and where they have iron-fisted leaders, you don't have dissent. You have people under control. You have some semblance of a civil society. Well, if you don't provide that sort of structure here in the West, where we're not accustomed to it because we raise our young men differently, mm-hmm. we expect them to act not like animals, but like civilized adults that take self-responsibility, then you're going to be in trouble. Those types of animals are coming here, and they need that structure, and we don't provide the structure, and as a result, they act like they did in Cologne and Western Europe throughout, and they commit atrocities, and they'll continue to do that.
Colonel McGinnis, we appreciate your time, and pray for a peaceful solution, whatever happens.
Thank you, Derek.
Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, author of the book, Never Submit, Will the Extermination of Christians Get Worse Before It Gets Better? On Tuesday night, we talked with Dr. Michael Heiser about the Divine Council, a sort of supernatural task force that helps God carry out his will, usually, except that some of those angels on the council decided to rebel and set up shop here on planet Earth. This coming Tuesday, we continue the conversation about Dr. Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, as we talk about the cosmic mountain and how it helps understand that the narrative of the Bible is actually a chronicle of the long war for God's holy mountain, Zion. You'll see that interview Tuesday night on SkyWatch TV on the Christian Television Network. That's DirecTV Channel 376, Dish Network Channel 267, and the Glory Star Satellite Channel 117. Now, you can watch the interview past, all of our past programs, and all of these daily updates on demand at your convenience on the SkyWatch TV channel on Roku, where we thank you for making us a part of your part of your day. We now have over 20,000 subscribers to the Roku channel. You can also, if you just want an audio-only option, something that you can take in an MP3 player, a little more portable, especially when you're operating the snowblower, than a video file, that is the SkyWatch TV podcast. And you'll find a link for that in the top menu bar at skywatchtv.com. Before January closes out while supplies last, your financial gift, well, we'll send this gift to you in exchange for your donation of any amount. It's the Miracles Journal, a way to keep track of devotional scriptures and thoughts, prayers, and God's working in your life during 2016, along with this beautiful wooden bookmark. Again, our gift to you for your gift of any amount during the month of January. Details on how to give posted at skywatchtv.com. Tomorrow, Sci Friday, I'm joined by Josh Peck and our science editor, my best friend, my wife, Sharon K. Gilbert. Until then, comments, questions, or suggestions, please email those to me at dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. And thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.